Cold wind moved slowly through the broken iron gate and across the silent ground of an old cemetery at the edge of a small American town. The town was the kind travelers passed without noticing from the highway. One gas station glowing through the night. One narrow diner where tired voices mixed with the smell of coffee and fried bread. Rows of choir houses where porch lights stayed on long after midnight as if someone inside feared the dark. Nothing about the place suggested mystery. Nothing about it suggested history worth remembering. Yet beneath the oldest grave in that forgotten corner of land, something had been waiting for many years, hidden from daylight, untouched by time, patient in a silence deeper than sleep. And on a grey morning just before winter settled fully across the hills, one person finally stood above it. Her name was Aloan Hale. She lived alone in a small upstairs apartment above a closed hardware store on the quiet side of town. Not young enough to feel fearless. Not old enough to feel finished with searching. She carried the quiet weight of someone who had spent years trying to understand a feeling that never formed into clear words. People who spoke about her used gentle descriptions. Calm. Respectful. A little distant. The kind of person who listened more than she spoke. They did not know she had not slept peacefully in months. They did not know the same dream returned again and again like a memory refusing to fade. In the dream she stood in a wide field of snow. No sound of wind. No sky above. Only endless white stretching in every direction. A silence so complete it felt heavy. And beneath the snow, something was buried, calling without a voice, pulling at her with a quiet certainty she could never explain. Each time she woke her heart raced as if she had been running through darkness. Her hands trembled as though they had touched ice. For several moments she never knew where she was. She never told anyone. Because the dream felt too real to be simple imagination. And too impossible to be truth. The only thing she understood was the strange sense that the dream did not belong to sleep. It belonged to memory. To something waiting in the past. That morning she had not planned to visit the cemetery. She had only meant to walk through the empty streets to quiet her thoughts, to escape the still air of her apartment that felt heavier with each passing night. The road curved past leafless trees and pale winter grass, past a wooden town sign faded by sun and rain, past the place where careful paint and tidy fences slowly gave way to neglect and forgetting. Her steps slowed when she noticed the iron gate standing slightly open. Rust covered the metal in rough dark patches. One hinge leaned outward as if someone had entered long ago and never returned. She did not believe in signs. She trusted ordinary explanations. Chance. Timing. Nothing more. Yet something inside her chest tightened in a way she could not ignore. Not fear. Not simple curiosity. Recognition. Like hearing a melody remembered from early childhood. Soft. Distant. Certain. Before she could think long enough to refuse. Her hand pressed gently against the cold iron. The gate opened with a tired sound that echoed across the quiet stones. Inside, the cemetery time felt slower, as if the air itself carried old memories. Graves stood uneven in the ground. Some broken. Some leaning. Some so worn the names had disappeared into smooth grey surfaces. No flowers rested there. No footprints marked the paths. Only tall dry grass moving softly in the wind. Aloan walked between the rows without deciding where to go. Her boots pressed into cold earth with careful steps. Each movement felt guided by something she could not see. She told herself she was only wandering, only passing through for a moment. But she did not turn back. Near the far edge of the cemetery, half hidden beneath the wide branches of a crooked oak, she stopped. One grave stood apart from the others. No carved message. No decoration. Only a simple stone marked with a single date. No name. A quiet chill spread through her body. Not sudden. Not sharp. But deep and certain. Her breathing slowed. Careful. Listening. Without knowing why, she knelt beside the stone. The ground near it looked slightly different. Not freshly opened. Yet not fully settled. As if the soil remembered being moved. Her fingers hovered just above the dirt. She felt foolish for even noticing. Strange for caring. Still she did not stand. Fragments of the dream returned. White snow. Endless silence. Something waiting beneath. Her pulse grew louder in her ears. Slow at first. Then stronger. She whispered softly that this meant nothing. Only coincidence. Only imagination shaped by sleepless nights. Yet the silence around her felt like expectation. Wind moved through the oak branches in a dry whisper overhead. The sound reminded her of pages turning in an empty room. Then her hand touched the ground. Cold. Firm. Real. For a long moment nothing happened. Only the sound of her own breathing. She almost laughed at herself. Almost stood to leave the strange feeling behind. And then, her fingers brushed against something smooth hidden beneath the thin layer of soil. Not stone. Not root. Something shaped by human hands. Placed there on purpose. Her heart began to pound. Slow, heavy beats that seemed to shake the quiet air. She looked around the empty cemetery. No movement. No distant voices. No sign of anyone watching. Beyond the trees the town continued its ordinary morning. Cars moving along the highway. Coffee pouring into white cups. People speaking about small, unimportant things. Unaware. Aloan pulled away a little more soil with trembling hands. Dark wood appeared beneath the dirt. Edges worn by years. Surface faded but still whole. A box. Small enough to hold in both hands. Old enough to belong to another lifetime. She froze in place. Every sensible thought told her to stop. To leave it buried. To call someone who understood rules and reasons. But another feeling rose stronger. Deeper than logic. The same silent pull from the dream. The same certainty that something below the surface had been waiting. For someone. For years. For her. She swallowed slowly, trying to calm the storm building inside her chest. Her fingers closed gently around the box. The wood felt lighter than she expected. Sealed without a lock. Held shut only by time and silence. A thin crack traced across the lid just wide enough to reveal darkness within. She stared at it while her breathing grew shallow. Questions forming faster than she could understand. Memories from childhood surfaced without warning. Moments filled with careful silence. Questions that had never received real answers. The sense that something important had always been missing just beyond reach. She had carried that feeling for as long as she could remember. A space inside her story left empty. And now, here, in a cemetery she had never visited before, she held a secret hidden beneath a grave with no name. The air felt colder around her. Heavier. As if the world itself leaned closer to listen. Her thumb rested against the edge of the lid. She knew with quiet certainty that once opened, nothing would return to the simple shape it held before. Some truths rearranged entire lives. Some stories refused to remain buried. Her heartbeat sounded loud enough to echo between the stones. She closed her eyes for a single breath, feeling the full weight of choice settle around her. Then slowly, carefully, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a small diary wrapped in cloth faded almost white by passing years. No title marked the cover. No name claimed the pages. Only the careful protection of someone who wanted the words to survive. Her hands hesitated above it. Afraid to touch. Afraid not to. Because deep inside, without reason, without proof, she already felt connected to it. Like recognizing a face never seen before. Wind moved again through the cemetery. Soft. Endless. Uncaring. The wider world continued forward. Unaware that beneath a forgotten grave, a hidden story had begun to wake. Aloan lifted the diary slowly from the box. Dust slipped away like quiet falling snow. The cover felt fragile. Almost warm despite the winter air. She opened to the first page. The handwriting there was careful and deliberate. Each letter formed with patience. Each line carrying private meaning. And the first sentence she saw stole the breath from her lungs. If you are reading this, it means they never wanted you to know who you truly are. The cemetery seemed to sink into deeper silence, as if even the wind had paused to listen. Aloan could not move. could not think, only stare at the words that felt as though they were staring back. Questions rose all at once, sharp and impossible. Who wrote this? Who was you? What truth had been hidden beneath a grave without a name? And why did it feel like the answer had been waiting for her all along? She looked once more across the empty, silent cemetery, then back to the fragile diary trembling in her hands, not knowing that opening those pages would pull her into a past the town had tried to forget, a past shaped by loss, by careful lies, by a disappearance no one had ever solved, a past that might explain the dream, the silence, the missing pieces of her own life, or shatter everything she believed about herself, because some secrets are buried to protect the living, and some are buried to protect the truth. Aloan drew in a slow, unsteady breath, and turned the page. What waited in the next lines would change her story forever. Yet one quiet question remained in the cold air around her. If this diary was never meant to be found, then who had been waiting for her to find it? Aloan did not realize how long she remained kneeling beside the open box. Time felt suspended in a thin, quiet space where sound could not fully enter. Only her breathing moved. Slow, uneven, careful. The words on the first page of the diary stayed fixed in her mind like a mark that could not be erased. If you are reading this, it means they never wanted you to know who you truly are. A distant crow called from somewhere beyond the trees. The sound felt unusually loud in the still air, as if the ordinary world was slowly returning while she remained caught between moments. Her fingers trembled slightly against the fragile paper. She feared the pages might break if she turned them too quickly, feared the truth might disappear if she moved too slowly. At last she lifted the corner of the page and continued reading. The handwriting remained steady, gentle, almost protective. I do not know when you will find this, or if you ever will. But if these words reach you, then the silence has finally been broken. For years I tried to keep you safe, not from strangers, but from the truth buried inside this town. Aloan felt a pressure building behind her ribs, a quiet ache that had no clear name. She had expected confusion, maybe even disbelief, but instead she felt recognition again. That same deep pull she could not explain. She turned another page. You were never meant to stay here, and I was never meant to leave you. What happened was not an accident, and it was not fate. It was a choice, made by people who believed secrets were more important than love. Her breath caught softly. The cold air touched the back of her throat. Memories shifted inside her mind like shadows changing shape. Her childhood home, the careful way adults spoke around her, the questions that were gently redirected instead of answered. She had always sensed a hidden story, something just beyond reach. Now the edges of it felt closer. A sudden gust of wind passed through the cemetery. The dry grass bent low, then slowly rose again. For a moment she felt exposed, kneeling there with the diary open in her hands. Anyone could walk in. Anyone could see. Yet no one came. The town remained distant and silent, holding its own secrets. Aloan stood slowly, her knees stiff from the cold ground. She looked once more at the grave with no name. A strange thought moved through her mind. This place was not where the story ended. It was where it had been hidden. She brushed loose soil from the wooden box and placed it gently back into the earth. Not to forget, but to protect what still remained. Then she held the diary close against her coat and began walking toward the gate. Each step felt different from the steps that had brought her there. Heavier, more certain, as if an unseen line had been crossed. Outside the cemetery the road looked the same as before. Empty, ordinary, unaware. Yet the world no longer felt ordinary to her. She returned to her apartment without noticing the distance, unlocked the narrow door, climbed the quiet stairs, entered the small room filled with pale winter light. Everything inside looked unchanged. The worn sofa, the small kitchen table, the stack of unopened mail near the wall. But the air felt different, charged with something waiting. She sat at the table and placed the diary in front of her. For several seconds she only looked at it, afraid that continuing would make everything real. Then slowly she opened to the next page. There is a house at the edge of Miller Road. White once, now fading. You passed it many times without knowing. Everyone in this town learned to forget it. Inside that house, the first lie was spoken. Her heart began to beat faster again. Miller Road was not far. She had walked past the quiet abandoned property more than once. Windows dark, paint peeling, yard overgrown with tall grass. She had never wondered about it before. It had simply been another forgotten place. Now it felt like a doorway. She kept reading. If you are strong enough to search for answers, go there before anyone knows you have this diary. Some truths are still dangerous. Even after all these years. Aloan leaned back slowly in the chair. The wood creaked softly beneath her weight. Dangerous. The word felt heavy. Out of place in a town so quiet. Yet something deep inside told her the warning was real. She closed the diary for a moment and pressed her hands together, trying to think clearly, trying to remain logical. Someone could have written anything. Stories, lies, confusion. But another thought followed immediately. Then why bury it beneath a grave with no name? Silence filled the room again. Her gaze drifted toward the window. Outside, the afternoon light had begun to fade into early evening grey. Soon the street would grow empty. Soon the town would settle into its slow nighttime quiet. A decision formed quietly inside her. Not sudden. Not reckless. Inevitable. She picked up the diary, put on her coat, and stepped back into the cold air. The walk to Miller Road felt longer than usual. Every sound seemed sharper, every shadow deeper, as if the town itself watched without moving. When she reached the end of the narrow street, she saw the house. Fading white paint barely visible in the dim light. Windows dark and empty like closed eyes. The front porch leaning slightly with age. Tall grass moved softly around the steps. No footprints. No sign of life. She stopped at the edge of the yard. Her heart beat loud in the quiet. This was only an old abandoned building. Nothing more. Yet the diary felt warm in her hand, as if urging her forward. One slow step. Then another. The wooden steps of the porch creaked under her weight. The sound echoed through the still evening air. She froze and listened. Nothing answered. Her fingers closed around the cold metal of the door handle. For a moment she could not move. Turning, it would mean entering the past. Entering whatever truth had been hidden from her. She thought of the dream again. The silent snow. Something waiting beneath. Her breath shook slightly. Then she turned the handle. The door opened with a long dry sound. Dust filled the air inside. Faint. Bitter. Undisturbed. The last light of evening stretched across the floor in thin pale lines, revealing an empty room. Bare walls. Broken furniture pushed into corners. No voices. No movement. Only the feeling that something had happened there once. Something important enough to be erased. Aloan stepped inside slowly. The floorboards whispered beneath her boots. She did not know what she was searching for, only that the diary had led her here. And somewhere within this silent house, another piece of the truth was waiting. Behind her. The door drifted slightly inward with the wind, closing partway on its own. The sound was soft, but final. Aloan turned back toward the dark interior, not knowing that this step across the threshold had already placed her closer to the hidden past than anyone had come in decades, and far closer to the danger the diary had warned about. The air inside the house felt older than the town outside. Not simply dusty, not simply abandoned. Older in a way that carried memory, as if the walls had listened for years and never spoken. Aloan stood just past the doorway, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light. Thin lines of evening grey slipped through cracked window glass and stretched across the wooden floor. Each breath tasted dry. Still. Untouched. She told herself again that this was only an empty structure. Only boards and nails and forgotten time. Yet the quiet pressed against her ears like a held whisper. She stepped forward slowly. The floor answered with a soft, uneven creak. The sound moved through the room and faded into silence as if swallowed. Nothing else moved. Her fingers tightened slightly around the diary, the paper edges warm against her palm. For a moment she considered leaving, returning to the safety of ordinary streets, calling someone, anyone. But the same quiet certainty that had led her to the grave now held her in place. If she walked away, the questions would remain, waiting, growing heavier. She moved deeper into the room. Broken furniture rested along the walls. A chair missing one leg. A narrow table split through the center. Dust covering everything in a thin pale layer like settled snow. The sight pulled gently at her memory. Snow in the dream. Silence. Something hidden. Her chest tightened. She crossed toward the far side of the room where a doorway opened into darkness. No door remained. Only an empty frame. Beyond it a narrow hallway stretched toward the back of the house. Shadows filled the length of it. Thick. Unwelcoming. She hesitated at the entrance. The diary shifted slightly in her grip as if reminding her why she had come. Go there before anyone knows you have this diary. The words returned clear and steady. She stepped into the hallway. The temperature felt colder there. The air heavier, as though sunlight had not touched it in many years. Her shoulder brushed the wall. Fine dust clung to her coat. Halfway down the corridor, she noticed something unusual. One section of the wooden floor looked different from the rest. Not broken. Not rotted. Replaced. The boards were slightly newer, barely visible in the dim light, but unmistakable once seen. Her heartbeat slowed, deepened. Someone had opened the floor once, then closed it again. Carefully. A quiet understanding moved through her. This house had not been forgotten by accident. She knelt slowly, setting the diary beside her on the floor. Her fingers traced the edge of the altered boards, a thin line where old would met newer grain. The space between them held darkness. For several seconds she did nothing, listening only to her own breathing, feeling the weight of the silent house around her. Then she pressed gently against one board. It shifted. Not much. Only enough to confirm what she already sensed. Her pulse began to rise again. Faster. Louder. She looked back down the empty hallway, half expecting to see someone standing there. No one. Only shadow and still air. Carefully, she lifted the loose board. Dust drifted upward in a faint cloud, revealing a narrow hollow space beneath the floor. Inside lay a small metal object, rectangular, darkened by age. A tin box, smaller than the wooden one from the grave, but sealed tight. Her breath caught softly. The diary had led her here. Her hands trembled as she lifted the box from the hidden space. Cold metal pressed against her skin. For a long moment she only stared at it. Questions moved through her mind faster than thought. Who hid this? When? Why? And the question beneath all others. What did this have to do with her? She opened the lid slowly. Inside rested several folded papers, yellowed with time, edges fragile, and beneath them, a photograph. She picked up the photograph first. The image showed the front of this same house, but not abandoned, not broken. New paint, bright windows, summer light. Two figures stood on the porch. One adult, one child. The adult face was partly turned away. Hard to see clearly. But the child. Her breath stopped. The child looked no older than 5. Dark hair falling across a small forehead. Eyes calm. Serious in a way children rarely are. Aloan felt the world tilt quietly beneath her. Because she was not simply looking at a stranger. She was looking at herself. The photograph slipped slightly in her shaking fingers. A sound escaped her throat. Soft. Unsteady. Almost disbelief. Memory tried to rise. But nothing clear came with it. Only fragments. Light through a window. A voice humming somewhere far away. Warm hands lifting her. Gone before she could hold them. Her chest ached sharply. She forced herself to breathe. Slow. Careful. The papers. She unfolded the first one. A document. Official. Stamped. Adoption record. Her vision blurred for a moment. Not from tears, but from the sudden collapse of everything she thought she understood. Names filled the page. Dates. Signatures. And one line near the center. Original birth name. Not Aloan. A different name she had never heard, yet felt echo inside her like something once known. Her hands shook harder. The second paper. A report. Brief. Cold in its language. Incident at private residence. One adult missing. Child relocated for safety. Case closed due to lack of evidence. Missing. The word felt hollow. Endless. The third paper was smaller. Folded many times. She opened it slowly. Handwritten. The same careful style as the diary. If anything happens to me, please make sure she is never told the truth until she is strong enough to face it. They are still watching. And silence is the only way to keep her alive. Aloan could no longer feel the cold floor beneath her knees. Still watching. The words settled heavily in the quiet hallway. A faint sound moved somewhere in the house. So soft she almost believed she imagined it. A floorboard shifting. Far away. Near the front room. Her head lifted slowly. Every muscle in her body went still. She listened. Silence returned. Thick. Unbroken. Maybe only the house settling. Old wood adjusting to night air. She wanted to believe that. But the warning in the note pulsed through her thoughts. They are still watching. Her heartbeat grew louder. Faster. She gathered the papers and photograph with careful shaking hands. Placed them back inside the tin box. Then reached for the diary beside her. Another sound. Closer this time. Not wood. Not wind. A step. Very soft. But real. All air seemed to vanish from the hallway. Aloan rose slowly to her feet. Every movement careful to avoid noise. Her eyes fixed on the dark end of the corridor leading back to the front room. Nothing visible. Only shadow. But she was no longer alone. The certainty of it spread through her like ice water. Someone else was inside the house. And whoever it was had not made a sound until now. Her fingers tightened around the diary. Paper bending slightly under the pressure. She could run. Push past. Reach the door. But her legs would not move. Because a deeper fear had already taken hold. What if the person in this house already knew she was here? Another step. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. Aloan's breath became silent. Held tight in her chest. The darkness at the end of the hallway shifted. Not much. Just enough to show movement. A shape separating from shadow. Tall. Still. Watching. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. The diary. The grave. The hidden photograph. The missing adult. The warning. All of it rushed together into one terrible understanding. The past had not stayed buried. And now, it had found her. For a moment that felt longer than time itself. Aloan could not move. The tall shape at the end of the hallway remained still. Neither coming closer, nor stepping back. Only watching. The dim light from the front room traced a faint outline around the figure. Enough to show a human presence. Not enough to reveal a face. Her heartbeat filled her ears with a dull rushing sound. So loud she feared it could be heard across the floorboards. Every instinct told her to run. To escape through the open doorway. To reach the quiet street and never return. But another feeling held her in place. Stronger than fear. Stronger than reason. If she ran now, the truth would remain unfinished. Forever just beyond reach. The diary pressed tightly in her hand. Paper bending beneath her fingers. She forced herself to breathe. Slow. Silent. Careful. The shape finally moved. One step forward into the thin grey light. An older man. Not threatening in the way she had imagined. No raised voice. No sudden motion. Only a tired stillness around him, as if he had carried something heavy for many years. His coat looked worn, dust resting along the shoulders, like he had been standing inside this house for a long time. Alohan's voice barely formed. "Who are you?" The words felt fragile in the cold air. The man did not answer immediately. His eyes lowered briefly to the diary in her hand, then lifted again to her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, rough with age. "I wondered when you would come back." The sentence struck her with silent force. Back. Not here for the first time, but returned. Her chest tightened painfully. "I have never been here before." She wanted the words to sound certain, but they trembled. The man studied her for a long moment. Not unkind. Not surprised. Just sad in a way that felt older than both of them. "You were too young to remember." The hallway seemed to narrow around her. Fragments of memory tried again to rise. Light through a window. Warm summer air. A voice calling softly from another room. Gone before she could reach it. Her fingers shook. "What do you want?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Fear hiding beneath it. The man's expression did not change. Nothing. Not anymore. A pause filled the space between them. "I only stayed to make sure no one else found the truth before you did." Silence followed. Heavy. Uncertain. Alohan's thoughts raced. The diary. The hidden box. The adoption record. The missing adult. "You knew." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You knew who I was." The man nodded once. Slowly. "Yes." The single word felt louder than a shout. Anger flickered suddenly through her fear. "Then why? Why hide it? Why let me live without knowing anything?" Her voice broke at the edge of the last word. The man closed his eyes briefly, as if the answer carried weight. "Because knowing the truth earlier would have put you in danger." The same warning as the note. "They are still watching." Her breath caught. "Who?" The man looked toward the dark front room. Not at anything visible. Just toward the past itself. People who believed silence was easier than justice. The missing adult from the report. Was it my mother? The question escaped before she could stop it. A long quiet passed. Yes. The world seemed to tilt again. But this time the feeling was softer. More painful than shocking. What happened to her? The man's shoulders lowered slightly, as if the years pressed down all at once. She tried to tell the truth. About something powerful people in this town wanted buried. Her pulse quickened. What truth? Another silence. Then, children were being taken from families who could not fight back. Quietly. Without records. Moved through systems that looked legal from the outside. Alohan felt cold spread through her arms. Your mother found proof. She planned to expose everything. The air in the hallway felt too thin to breathe. And then, she disappeared. The word fell softly, but it shattered something inside her. Tears filled her eyes before she noticed. Not loud. Not sudden. Just quiet grief rising from a place deeper than memory. No one searched long. No one asked questions. Because the same people who caused it controlled the answers. Her hands trembled around the diary. Why am I safe now? The man looked at her with steady, tired eyes. Because time changes power. And secrets weaken when enough years pass. Another pause. And because you were hidden well. Given a new name. A quiet life far from anyone who remembered. The adoption. Understanding settled slowly. Painfully. You protected me. The words felt uncertain. The man shook his head faintly. I only followed her last request. Emotion tightened his voice for the first time. Make sure she grows up free. Even if she never knows me. Alohan covered her mouth as a soft sob escaped. Years of empty questions suddenly filled with meaning. The silent dream. The buried diary. The missing pieces. All leading here. Why stay in this house? Because someone had to guard what was left. Until you were ready. Ready. She did not feel ready. Only broken open by truth. Another question formed quietly. Are they still out there? The man held her gaze. Some are gone. Some are old. Some still pretend nothing happened. But the proof your mother hid is enough now. Enough for what? For the truth to finally be heard. Hope flickered faintly through her grief. Small. Fragile. What do I do? The man looked at the diary. Then back at her. You decide whether the silence ends. Or continues. The choice settled heavily in her chest. Fear whispered to walk away. To keep the quiet life she had known. But another voice. Stronger. Warmer. Her mother's voice she had never truly heard. Truth matters. Aloan wiped her tears slowly, breathing deeper than before. I will tell it. The words felt steady. Certain. Something gentle softened in the man's expression. Relief mixed with sadness. Then my waiting is finished. A distant sound of wind moved through the broken house. Like a long breath finally released. Aloan felt a strange calm settle around her grief. Not peace, but direction. She was no longer searching without shape. She knew where the path led. When she looked up again, the man seemed smaller somehow, as if the years holding him there had loosened their grip. Thank you. She did not know why she said it, only that it felt necessary. He nodded once. Live freely. That is thanks enough. Silence returned. But it was different now. Not empty. Complete. Morning arrived slowly over the quiet town. Not with bright color. Not with sudden warmth. Only a pale grey light spreading across rooftops and empty streets. The kind of morning that feels careful. As if the world itself is unsure what has changed during the night. Aloan stepped out of the fading White House just as the first birds began to move in the cold air. The wooden door remained slightly open behind her. No sound came from inside. No movement. No sign that anyone had stood in that hallway only minutes before. She turned once, looking at the broken windows, the leaning porch, the tall grass bending softly in the wind. In daylight the house looked smaller, ordinary, almost harmless. Yet she knew something inside it had finally ended, and something else had begun. The diary rested against her chest beneath her coat, warm from her body, real. Certain. For the first time since childhood, the emptiness inside her story no longer felt silent. It hurt. Yes. But it had shape now. Meaning. Direction. She walked slowly back toward the main road. Each step steady despite the exhaustion settling into her bones. She had not slept. Had not rested. Yet a strange strength carried her forward. The kind that comes only after truth breaks through fear. Cars passed in the distance. A delivery truck. A neighbor leaving for work. Ordinary life continuing without pause. No one looking twice. No one knowing. The world rarely stops for hidden histories, even when they change everything for someone. By the time she reached her apartment, the sky had lightened to a soft winter blue. Thin sunlight touched the windows across the street. Inside, nothing had moved. The same quiet table. The same unopened mail. The same still air. But she was different. She placed the diary gently on the table. Not with hesitation this time, but with care. Then she sat, hands resting flat against the wood, breathing slowly, letting the silence settle around her in a new way. Not the heavy silence of missing answers. The quiet of knowing what must come next. Hours passed without her noticing. The sun climbed, then softened. Shadows shifting across the small room. She read every remaining page of the diary. Every careful sentence her mother had written. Every fear. Every hope. Every plan that had never been finished. There were names. Dates. Places. Enough truth to open wounds the town had buried for decades. And between the lines. Love. Endless. Protective. Unbroken even by disappearance. Tears came quietly more than once. Not violent. Not loud. Just the slow release of years spent wondering why something always felt incomplete. Near the final page, one sentence rested alone. If you are reading this, then you survived. And that means the truth still has a chance to live. Aloan closed the diary gently after that, her hands no longer trembling. Outside, afternoon light began to fade toward evening again. One full day turning since she first walked through the cemetery gate. It felt like a lifetime. She stood, walked to the window, looked down at the street where ordinary people carried groceries and spoke about ordinary things. For a moment fear returned. Telling the truth would not be simple. Some would deny it. Some would try to silence it again. Even now, the past never releases quietly. Her heartbeat quickened. She could still choose safety, still put the diary away, still live the small quiet life she had known. No one would blame her. No one would even know. The thought lingered, tempting in its softness. Then another memory surfaced. Not from the dream. Not from the night. From the words her mother had written again and again. Freedom matters more than silence. Aloan's breathing steadied. She understood something clearly now. Safety without truth was only another kind of cage. And her mother had already paid the price to open the door. Slowly, certainly, she stepped away from the window. The decision settled inside her like stone. Heavy, unmoving, real. She gathered the diary, the photograph, the folded papers from the hidden tin box, carefully placing them into a small worn bag. Each object no longer just evidence of pain, but proof of love that refused to disappear. When she opened her apartment door, even the hallway outside felt different. Wider somehow. Full of air she had never noticed before. The town waited beyond the stairs. Unchanged. Unaware. But not for long. Days later, people would begin to hear the story. First quietly, then louder. Old records reopened. Forgotten names spoken again. Questions asked by voices that refused to fade. Some would deny. Some would fear. Some would finally remember. Truth moves slowly. But once it begins, it does not stop easily. And at the center of it all would be one woman who once stood alone in a silent cemetery, holding a diary never meant to be found. Not searching anymore. Speaking. Weeks passed. Winter deepened. Snow finally came to the hills outside town. Soft white covering streets and rooftops in quiet light. One evening, Aloan returned to the cemetery. Not drawn by confusion this time. Not by dreams. By choice. The broken iron gate still leaned open. Wind still moved through the tall grass. The grave still rested in patient silence. She walked to the stone with no name, kneeling gently beside it. For a long moment she said nothing, only listening to the stillness around her. Snow began to fall lightly, small white pieces settling on the ground, on the stone, on her dark coat. The dream, now standing in the real world. But it felt different. No longer empty. No longer calling. Complete. She placed a single white flower against the base of the stone, her fingers lingering there in the cold. I told the truth. The whisper barely touched the air, yet it felt heard. Wind moved softly through the trees above, a quiet sound like pages turning somewhere far away. For the first time, the silence answered with peace instead of questions. Tears warmed her cheeks, but they carried no despair, only goodbye and gratitude. She remained there until the snow thickened, until the world turned soft and white around her. Then slowly, she stood, breathing deeply, filling her lungs with cold clean air, the weight she had carried for years, the unnamed absence, the quiet searching, gone, not because the past had changed, but because she finally knew where she came from, and why she had been saved. Truth had not broken her. It had given her back her life. As she walked away from the grave, her footsteps marked the fresh snow behind her. Clear, certain, leading forward, not back. At the gate, she paused once more, looking across the silent cemetery now glowing faintly in evening light. Some secrets stay buried forever, but some wait, not to hide, to be found by the one person strong enough to carry them into the light. Aloan stepped through the gate, into the quiet road, into the living world beyond memory and silence. Snow continued to fall, soft, endless, gentle, and for the first time in many years, she was no longer searching for who she was. She was finally free to become who she chose to be. The town lights slowly appeared one by one in the distance, warm against the winter dark. Life moving forward, as it always does. But somewhere beneath the quiet ground of a forgotten grave, a hidden story had risen, spoken, heard, and because of that, nothing would ever be completely silent again.